Okay, we are all set. So I will call to order this special meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. It is Wednesday, March the 2nd, 2022. The purpose of this meeting is primarily a budget working session for our 2022-23 village budget. Any changes to the agenda? Anything we need to add that we know of? Okay. So we'll jump right into the budget working session. You have in front of you, I decided to try something a little new this year, which is a bit of a budget summary, kind of the highlights of some of the changes, and we'll go through everything line by line as we always do, but the primary changes and considerations for us to consider. Within the budget, we've assumed 3% employee raises across the board. That actually includes DPW, even though they're contractually only set to receive a 2% increase. However, we begin or their current contract, collective bargaining contract expires at the end of May. So depending on what is negotiated, it would be retroactively effective June 1. So allowing for a 3%, the possibility of a 3% raise to coincide with all other village employees. We're assuming a 5% health insurance premium increase at the beginning of 2023. That's been our track record at the consortium. One of the efforts we're trying to do, which you'll hear more about in coming months, is some long-term planning with respect to the consortium and trying to maintain flat health insurance increases over time. I have included a wage for a half-time deputy clerk. It remains to be seen what that actually looks like structurally. I think we just lost Keith. What that actually looks like structurally, as there are different options that we might have with how that role is constructed, but at least initially, I think it's a half-time position. We have realized we have actual decreases in our workers' comp insurance. Don't ask me how that happened. And decreases in our kind of general liability insurance. We did go out to bid this year on that, and I'll actually need an executive session to discuss a piece of that. But regardless of which of the bids we take, it's going to be some savings over the last couple of years. So that's nice. Some considerations when we're looking at constructing the budget is we'll do the revenue side of the budget first. You'll see that we are on pace for a very large, in fact, it'll be historically our largest ever year. Let me let Keith back in. Keith, if you're able to access the Dropbox, there's a meeting folder with today's date on it, and there's a budget summary that I put together with just kind of some high-level considerations for what we're going to look at tonight. One of the first things is our sales tax. So we are on pace for a very large sales tax receipt year, kind of the post-COVID economic strength that we've seen throughout the country, but particularly this part of New York State. Has trickled down to sales tax receipts. So we have to decide how close to this year's actual number do we want to assume we might receive in the next budget year. We've always kind of stayed at or below the most recent year's actual numbers. I know that the county will sometimes project a 3 to 5% increase for next year and use that number. We've historically tried not to get too aggressive on that side, but that'll be something for us to consider. We have to consider how much do we want to budget for our sidewalk capital plan. Do we want to phase that in over the next few years? How big of a number do we want to build in there? And all of that then feeds into what tax rate do we want to target? So immediately under that on this sheet, you'll see going back 6, 7, or 8 years, what our village tax rate has been. I had some fluctuation in the high $6 range. And then as of 2019-2020 budget year, we've managed to keep it flat at $7.25 for the last 3 years. I believe we will be able to do that again, but the question is, should we? Should we be bumping it a small amount? 5 cents, 10 cents? Do we want to ease into a larger number? or not. That's just a question. And then part of that consideration is our total village-wide assessment only went up 0.69%. Now, if you haven't already, you're going to start to hear people getting assessment letters. So Tompkins County has reassessed everyone, including the village, but those assessments don't become official until July 1. So our June 1 budget year will be using what will very soon be an old assessment number. So next budget year, we're going to be using the July 1, 2022 county assessments for the village. And those numbers are going to be substantially higher. We're talking about 7 or 8% likely. So that will mean that we effectively will have a lot of room to keep the tax rate steady next year, potentially, depending on what other spending items come up. To the resident, obviously, a flat tax rate and an increased assessment still costs more out of pocket. What we want to avoid, if at all possible, is a situation where we have large tax rate increase and a large assessment increase. That's the double whammy that nobody wants. So that'll go into our thinking when it comes to constructing the tax rate. We have some comparisons, which we looked at years and years ago and haven't done since. So I thought it would be neat to take a look at where do we fall in the other municipalities in Tompkins County, not including towns. Towns are a little bit of a different animal, but of the 6 villages and the city of Ithaca, which also isn't entirely a fair comparison, but of the 6 villages in the city of Ithaca, we are slightly above average, but we are actually the median at 725. So we're right in the middle of the pack, which I think is not a bad place to be. The other consideration when we get to the looking at tax rate is we have an unencumbered, what I call an unencumbered working balance. Dwayne touched on this at our meeting last a couple of weeks ago with respect to cash accounting versus accrual accounting. The move to accrual accounting for municipalities only occurred a few years ago. And I was one of the ones who said that it shouldn't be done that way, but nobody listened to me. So I still look at our May 31 unencumbered balance on a cash basis. That's cash we have. Now I get the reason for the accrual accounting, and our AUD is filed that way, and the audit is filed that way. But accrual accounting makes sense when you receive a bunch of money up front, and if someone cancels a contract, they get a prorated refund. That is not the case with our fire and EMS contracts. That money is the village's money, and the minute it's paid, we don't actually have a mechanism to prorate that back if one of the towns decided to not contract with us anymore. So our cash-based unencumbered balance at the end of May was roughly $407,000. That is down from last year, primarily because we allowed Ulysses to defer payment of $253,000, call it, of their fire and EMS, I think it was the EMS contract, so that they could have enough cash on hand to finish the Cemetery Road Bridge project. They have since paid that. So if we take the May 31 of last year's unencumbered balance, plus the Ulysses deferred payment, plus the first round of ARPA money, which is not accounted for in Dwayne's audit from last year because that was paid in July. We actually have what I'm calling a working unencumbered balance of about $750,000, which is the most we've seen in a long time. It's a little bit too high. We need to spend that down a bit. So again, we've got this decision to make as to how we want to target tax rates. There is, of course, always going to be an argument made by someone that we should be trying to lower the tax rate with that. But I think when we're looking at staffing needs, what is EMS going to look like if we have to move, increase staffing at some point, sidewalk capital plans, all of these things, I wouldn't want to lower the rate, but I could be convinced to keep it flat for a 4th year in a row. So with that, unless anyone has anything they want to add or any questions to the lengthy word salad that I just.
I think just a quick note, all of that said, just for frame of reference, the budget as it is now is basically flat. Assuming an appropriated fund balance maintains.
Yeah.
Just so.
So I think we'll so Vicky and I have been through this budget several times. So I think we'll just kind of go through it line by line, jump in, stop me if there's a question, so that I don't spend too much time pausing, asking for questions. But if there's anything that any of the three of you want to, or four of you want to discuss, just jump right in. Areas that are highlighted in either blue, I think blue, Vicky. Those are ones where we have a decision to make, or at least a consideration to be aware of. So starting on the revenue side, you don't have a property tax number built in there yet. That'll be a result of everything else. The interest and penalties on real property taxes, we are keeping flat from last year at $6,000. We are on pace for about $458,000 in sales tax revenue. That is using a combination of every check we've actually received. And then going back, I went back and looked at last year's actual receipts. So rather than, dividing by 8 and multiplying by 12, I went back and looked at last year's actual receipts for January through May. And we get to 458,000. So again, wanting to err on the conservative side, not sure what, supply chain issues and inflation and all those other considerations might do to people's spending. Is that balanced and offset by everyone feeling freer to move around for a second straight year? Time will tell. But in order to err on the conservative side, I have 450 as a sales tax number. I could be talked into going lower if there are concerns. But I also think that the fund balance is at a place where we might be able to absorb a shortfall in that number should it occur. Any thoughts on sales tax while we're there?
I tend to agree with what you did. I think it's better to be fairly conservative. This doesn't strike me as like overly conservative. It's not. I think it's within the realm of the reasonable, but also on the conservative side, which I think is exactly right. And that's, been our historic approach, and served us well.
Yeah, if we wanted to be very conservative, we would shoot for a number that's say 10% lower than our expected actual receipts. So like a 410, 420 kind of number. I don't know that that's necessary. I certainly wouldn't want to try to target a growth rate and say, well, 458 is going to be 475. That would be aggressive. Comfortable with 450, but if the board wanted a lower number just to be safe kind of thing, I think we could absorb that.
Typically been pleasantly surprised to see the number coming above, and I'm going to make positions. The numbers are working out well enough with this number.
Okay. Justin?
Yeah.
All right, so 450 it is. Utilities gross receipts tax. This is negotiated. It's a negotiated rate, actually, I think at the state level for a tax on certain utilities, cable TV, electricity and whatnot. That has also seen a slight increase. We budgeted for 39, we're on pace for 41, so I bumped that up to 40. Clerk fees relatively flat, police fees will be flat. That police crossing guard reimbursement line, I'm leaving that as a placeholder because we did get pre-COVID, we did get agreement from the schools to fund half of the cost of a crossing guard. Then COVID came and we didn't have a second crossing guard, and now we still can't find one. So I think that's that'll be some revenue from the school if and when that ever materializes, but I don't want to budget for it because I don't know what that looks like. Fire inspection fees are estimated to be in line with our actual receipts, or around 3,000 for the year, or will be at the end of May. Police contracts, which ones are those? Remind me.
Grassroots
Grassroots.
and Burnberry.
So that's a pretty much an actual number as to what we will be charging, now that there isn't a reason for grassroots not to happen, at least not a reason of outside making, put it that way. This EMS revenue line.
That is football and soccer standbys that we do. We don't generally budget for them.
Right. So we have an agreement in place with the schools that when they request a second ambulance for sporting events, they pay the actual costs of the wages for those individuals. And as Vicky said, we don't budget for it, but it generates a little bit of revenue each year. So zoning fees, this is Tom's estimate of his fees for zoning related matters, which looks to be on pace for about 4, but we're going to keep it conservative at 3,000. Operating permits, same thing. Businesses on Main Street primarily. Planning board
I'm
fees.
sorry, operating for the second, we don't have any actuals.
Well, because Tom and I need to go over this because I have it as a budget line, but he puts it as a different line out of his, so I just need to review it.
Okay.
Planning board fees, we never budget for it because we never know what the planning board is going to be encountered with. Stop DWI is money that comes through Tompkins County through the Stop DWI program. That's contractual from the county. Fire protection, that is what the towns of Ulysses, Covert, and Hector have already paid us, essentially. EMS, same thing. Ambulance for Covert, Ulysses, Hector, and the Mecklenburg Ambulance District. Due from other governments. I don't even know why we still have that line. It's a placeholder in case there's any governmental payment for other things. Interest and earnings, unfortunately, when they say interest rates are spiking, they mean they spiked from 1.3 to 1.7% in a 10-year note. So we've got a ways to go before we can actually earn any money on reserves. Same thing with interest on reserves. Rental wireless. So this is what we are paid for all of the cellular infrastructure on the water tower, primarily.
We are gonna charge more, or we don't, that's built in?
There's a contract.
It's what the contract, so there was an increase this year we're in. So we should be, well, you can see by the expected number, it's expected to be right at 39. So there haven't been any additional increases. Building permits, this is a Tom estimate based on activity. Sale of real property, we don't have any sales pending or expected. Sale of equipment, we don't have any pending or expected. Insurance recoveries, we never want to anticipate workers' comp reimbursements or anything like that. This refund of prior year expense, I believe, is a budget mod.
Well, 253 of it is the EMS from the town of Ulysses.
The deferred payment, right?
Yeah.
So that's not something we're likely to see again in the next budget year. Same thing with gifts and donations.
Main sales tax. It's all in the notes what it has to do.
In yellow is AIM. The governor's budget does still have AIM at the current funding level, no increase. Reimbursements, miscellaneous income, miscellaneous grants, those are placeholders. The mulch dial truck, that's just a guesstimate of what we're going to receive from people buying mulch from the village. Disability reimbursement, again, a refund line if we have any disability claims. Mortgage tax, this is another one where I've erred on the conservative side. So we are on pace anytime a home is sold. There's a tax paid to the county and a piece of that comes back to the village. That's on pace to be much higher than the 15,000 we anticipated for the current budget year. But I'm going to keep that number the same, not because I'm expecting the real estate market to dip, but just because we don't have any homes for sale. There's no inventory currently, so that'll slow that number somewhat. Consolidated highway aid, that's CHIPS, that's money from New York State to assist with paving. That's earmarked to be the same in the governor's budget. Farmers market business sponsorship. This is all arrangements with the farmers market, what they expect to generate in terms of revenue, which flows through the village accounts. So that's the next several lines. That's their budget. Second to last line under revenue, there is $30,000 left in money that was borrowed for what ended up being the South Street section of the sidewalks that were just completed. We've been using, there's actually 100 and some left at one point. We've been using 15 to 30 a year because we can use that only for more sidewalks in that area or for debt service. The debt service on those sidewalks is in the expense side, so we can utilize that money towards that piece of it. So this will actually be the last year that we'll have any of it. We'll have spent that down now. Again, there's some anticipation of a large assessment increase next year, so we'll be able to absorb some of these things that might go away on the revenue side, like the sidewalk ban balance next year. Intra-fund transfer, this is actually EMS billing receipts. So I was surprised, Ben, to find out that we're on pace for about 116.
Yeah.
That number always makes me a little squirmy, so
It doesn't make any sense.
undershooting it, calling it 110.
100% agree with that approach. I have never been able to figure that out.
And
We've adjusted billing rates. It seems to have the opposite impact.
So we're really more than
Yeah, we,
Something like that.
we probably should review rates, we haven't done that in
Yeah,
6
it was a couple
years.
yeah.
yeah, Kristen actually had started.
Okay.
Add that to Joel's list. Any questions on the revenue side? Once upon a time, we would take a whole meeting to do the revenue side.
No, you know, it's actually worth noting as an aside, that the sort of executive, budget presentation
Yeah.
model. thing.
You like it? Okay,
There's a reason that every other board in the entire world does it this way.
it's true. I don't know if every village board does, but certainly the towns and counties and cities, they do.
Well.
Yeah. Right, yeah. All right, then the expense side. So we have no change to the compensation to village board members. Village board contractual was at 3,500 last year. Very little of it was spent, with the exception of our new friend, the meeting owl, that was recently spent. So I've actually lowered that to 2,000 unless there is an expenditure that the board thinks it may want to make. I do want to do something about these tables, proper conference tables, but that's not going to be, hopefully, won't be overly expensive. I've reduced, or I've kept the mayor's contractual line at 0. I zeroed that out last year. It's nothing that I need to spend any of the village money on. Auditor contractual remains the same. The treasurer personnel line, you'll see, has been reduced due to.
I actually have a question with the other contract.
Yeah.
If we ended up spending more this year, why would we not adjust the
The reason it was more is because we had them do the formulas for the COVID, which cost us money that we didn't anticipate.
So there
Which
was.
isn't something we expect to do next year.
No,
There was a complex calculation when the ARPA money was released. There was essentially, this is what you can use this money for. It's water, sewer, broadband, certain types of infrastructure projects, or to make up for, quote, lost revenue due to COVID. And that formula was not easy.
Yeah.
So we had Insero do that calculation for us, which was worthwhile because the calculation concluded that our calculated lost revenue was actually greater than all of the ARPA money we're going to be receiving, which means we can just leave it in the general fund, which is what we've done. That will allow us to manage tax rates and whatnot. Treasurer personnel line, you'll notice has been decreased due to the lady to my left's semi-retirement. Clerk treasurer equipment, we have at 500, contractual 500. These are just kinds of office odds and ends. Training, we had budgeted a fair bit last year for training that some of it includes the annual trip to NICOM. We've actually reduced that back down. Again, Vicki won't be taking any more training. And the need for additional training there should be relatively limited. If we run into an issue, then we can always have that be an overage, but it's not a line that will have a giant overage. Clerk personnel services is payroll increase at 3%. Deputy clerk. So I calculated.
Wait, I'm sorry, what is clerk personnel services?
So we take the clerk's salary and it's broken out into by different departments. So that's kind of the
Oh,
front
that's
office
right.
portion of the clerk. Part of the clerk and treasurer, part of their salaries are divided. In the case of the clerk, a substantial amount of it goes to the water budget because of water
Okay.
billing. So it's split out
Right.
among different departments. The deputy clerk, I made up a number because I don't know what that position is really going to look like. I'm calling it $25 an hour at 20 hours a week. All of it in general. I'm not splitting that out to water or anywhere else. It could certainly be less than that. It would only be more than that if we ended up hiring someone full-time. But I think that's at least a bit of a buffer because I don't anticipate it being more than that in this next budget year. Law contractual and keeping it 10, although we are on pace to be slightly over that. I don't know that we'll be that much over it. There are legal lines specific to zoning, specific to planning, specific to the other departments that would absorb issues on that side of things. This is kind of just a general village board has legal questions that are not specifically. It's the flags line. Yes, it's the flags and banners line, exactly. Engineer contractual, we generally don't budget much for the engineer because most of their work tends to be water and sewer related. Potentially there could be a need to put money in there for sidewalk, depending on what that looks like. But if it's through a grant application process, then there would be offsetting revenue if that line goes over. Elections contractual, we have an election in 2 weeks. There's no anticipation of one in the next budget year, so that line is zeroed out. Building personnel. So this is an allocation of, oh, is that just cleaning?
Yes.
Okay, so that's just the cleaner for the front office. Now, building equipment, $8,000. There is a consideration to replace the copier. Very large, what is it, Toshiba?
Mhm.
I actually think it can wait till next year. That's just my thought.
I didn't think about it.
I don't know how much we use it, so it's hard to say.
Lots and lots and lots and lots.
That's what the water bills are printed on.
No,
No, it's primarily the police department, the front office, and Tom. They're the primary ones that use it. I think it's got at least another year left in it. Tammy did go get a quote for it, which is where that 8,000 comes from. I think Tom has issues with the copier from time to time, but
There's always issues with
I'm not
copiers.
convinced that's not operator error.
But you, it wasn't that many years ago.
7.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Which isn't that like 15, 16?
You don't approve of time.
Yeah.
I would just assume wait a year. I would like to have this on the list for next year for consideration.
But it's still under, along with the copier, we have some sort of maintenance agreement,
Yes.
service agreement, so.
Yeah, it's a purchase and they maintain it.
Yeah.
They refill it and all of that. So if there's no objection, I think we'll just pull that, Becky. Next line, office building contractual. This is this is paper, toilet paper, just stuff for the building. Marginal increase. Maintenance and repairs is the same. Gas and electric we bumped up for obvious reasons. You'll notice the buildings and insurance line is down. That's one of the changes due to getting new quotes for the liability insurance. IT contractual, that is Jeff. That is our IT professional. I am going to be introducing at our April TCOG, Thomas County Council of Governments meeting, I'm going to be introducing the notion of going out for an RFP for municipal IT services where we bundle the municipalities that don't do it in-house. So the county does it themselves, city of Ithaca does it themselves, town of Ithaca does it themselves. And then all of the other municipalities either have a Jeff Burns or they have a contract with a small outfit themselves. So if I can get some buy-in from everyone at TCOG, I'd like to at least take those 14 municipalities outside the county and the city and go to, you looked at some numbers, go to someone like that and say, hey, here was your number for the village. What if you got 14 clients? Can we get some
Okay, so we're
economies?
still not talking about like outsourcing to some larger corporations, national, or using that local
No,
business.
it would be more like, I mean, I don't know if they would be Ithaca based, but somewhere central New York based, most likely, I would think.
The one I was talking to, there is an office that used to be the local company, they're not the larger company or something, but they're still missing. But I think that makes a ton of sense. We actually, for having a one-person shop, are doing a great job on the bare essentials, backups and that sort of thing. It seems well put together, but there's a whole range of other pieces that we could really benefit from having just a more fully rich featured kind of contract with. But it was a big lift. It was a big jump from a single person.
Sure,
And
I would just be adamant that it was a New York State-based company, because the money comes from the local taxpayers to then pay local businesses seems to make a lot more healthy sense.
And this, by the way, is no knock at all on.
Syracuse, Rochester, Binghamton, they're not gonna be-
Sure. This is not a knock in any sense on Jeff Burns. He's served the village well for many years.
We
I
can
think,
increase it.
and we can certainly continue to utilize him while we're figuring out what our broader needs are. I know he probably wants to retire at some point. He's been doing this a very long time. But the town of Ulysses state comptroller audit they just went through focused on IT.
Sure.
So that's becoming an increasing thing is how robust is your IT infrastructure? And the answer is, well, we're kind of okay, but there's a lot of room for.
Well, and certainly security as you get more online payments and all kinds of things to be considered.
But for this next budget year anyway, we are more or less status quo on that piece. Workers' comp insurance, as we mentioned earlier, did see a decrease. Can't plan on that every year, but it's nice when we do get it. Reimbursable expenses is a placeholder line. We've got estimates for phone, our web design contract.
Ben, do you know if that's gonna stay?
I haven't heard anything else from him, so
Okay.
I'm assuming so.
So that's what I just went with
I
was,
think that sounds good.
okay.
Central garage equipment, so now we're in the DPW section of the budget. That remains flat. Central garage building repairs, there is some need for some work on that kind of square brick building down at Corey Street. That is relatively urgent, so that'll be budgeted for to be done this summer. The DPW contractual line is at 17.5, that's a slight bump. Gas and electric, slight bump, training, essentially flat, fuel. Why the reduction in fuel from last year's budget? Just their usage is
Just,
down?
yeah, we based it on usage and then we upped it by 10% because of fuel costs being going up.
So we've been using less fuel, it's not a bad thing.
Right.
Liability and building insurance, this is the DPW's building and liability portion of the overall liability insurance that we just sent out to bid and got quotes back. Workers' comp, again, slight decrease. Phone, and then we jump out of DPW and go to municipal association dues.
$600 on that, is that how much do you mix it? How much do you- System that they have where they can communicate with each other.
And include reimbursement for their stuff. Yeah. Go
Is
ahead.
that-
Right, no, so they do have, essentially,
Yeah,
But I don't think that's really for this. This is just covering some of the-
So part of their Teamsters contract, they get cell phone reimbursement. So
well,
we,
it's based on the anticipated expenses. Okay, sorry.
so we, because we added a 5th employee that's higher than
Okay.
last year. Contingent account, that's an old one, we might pull at some point. I haven't used that in a long time. Which I still have in mind, but I blacked it out. Police, so we have relatively, not super significant, but we do have an increase in that budget line, again, still in anticipation. Chief has been good about coming in under budget the last couple of years, but that's actually due to the fact that we have not been able to hire that second full-time officer. So we are continuing the budget for having 2 full-time officers. We're actually budgeting for being able to, if necessary, start a second full-time officer at a slightly higher rate if we have to compete, if we find the right person. So that's the rationale behind the increase over, not only over, we know why the anticipated expenses are so much lower is because we haven't hired that second full-timer. But the reason for the increase over last year's number is 3% wage increase plus a bump for potentially a higher starting hourly rate for that second full-time officer if we should need it. Police equipment, slight bump. Police contractual remains the same. Police training remains the same. Some of our training comes out of contractual, so those are kind of not entirely interchangeable lines, but sometimes they end up being that. Fuel is based on usage with a 10% bump, as Vicki mentioned. Vehicle maintenance, we have a couple of older. One of the Explorers is a little bit older now, so anticipating some more maintenance over time. Police insurance, that's the liability side. That's again benefiting from the decrease. Police telephone, small equipment, uniforms, vests, those are all kind of actualized numbers. Traffic control, contractual, this is in anticipation of trying to get more assistance with crossing guards. We will have a reimbursement side of that if we do hire a second one for part of that as the school helps. Sure is.
I was thinking just continue to post it every so often.
Yeah, it's an odd one. I mean, the hours are odd, early morning and then middle of the day kind of thing.
It's more of a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So from police to fire, so that first fire line, again, that's a portion of the front office salaries that are broken out as for their time spent on anything fire department related. All of this, and I'll just kind of race through this because all of this was set at our last fall fire budget meeting. We have equipment, contingency line, which we should probably revisit this fall. I'm not sure what we're using the contingency line for. Contractual, gas and electric, training, turnout gear, that is turnout gear, not geek.
Yeah.
It's been geek for several years, and it's reluctant to change it. But, prevention renovations, we've had that renovations line zeroed out for a few years now because we're hoping for a new building, not a renovated one. Station maintenance, this is just every day, day-to-day maintenance of the building. Small equipment, we pay for the firefighter physicals, ongoing vehicle repair, fire department insurance and workers' comp, office supplies, fuel, telephone, hose, ladder pump, pagers and radios, a little bit for legal if they ever need it. So that's fire. Year management program will be wrapping up this month, March. maintain status quo there. I'll have numbers once the program wraps up as far as how many deer we're taking this year. Safety inspection. So this is Tom. This is fire inspections, building inspections and the like. That's his payroll under that line. His equipment needs are limited. Code enforcement, contractual, that's for spending that he might need as the code enforcement officer. Trainings he may take, legal issues that may come out of his work. Fuel, that's for the village-owned vehicle that is available to Tom when he's on the job. That's code enforcement and fire inspection. We'll get to zoning and planning, zoning officer work later. Ambulance. Now, there is a change to be aware of. We had budgeted for, you don't see it here, but what was adopted in the fall and sent to the towns. We have some, and this is, I know, been a sticking point in the past. We're not making discretionary changes to the EMS side of the budget after it's been adopted and the towns have paid us. These are actual realized changes due to Joel becoming the manager. So we had budgeted for a manager separately from all the paramedics. Now that one of the paramedics is the working manager, that changes the cost structure there. So that's realized in personnel, and the towns will see that in the next budget cycle that we start this fall when they see how that will be budgeted for next year. I'll skip through the next several lines. These are all the same as what was approved last fall. Vehicle insurance line was adjusted a little bit due to our new insurance. Workers' comp came down, which is nice. I will say that, just so you're aware, that ambulance, going back to that ambulance personnel line, there's a reduction for Joel becoming the manager. There's an addition for an additional per diem because he is working 2 of his shifts on shift and 1 of his shifts as the administrator, plus whatever else is needed. So that 1 shift that he's intentionally not on the ambulance, we're going to need a per diem to fill that. So that wage is built back in, and we have, did we add the stipends?
Oh, no, we didn't, because I don't know what they are.
So we have not added the stipends, but we can absorb that in those changes. Skip down to the end of ambulance, telephone, EMS supplies, pagers, radio, legal, that's all as adopted last fall. Switching spreadsheets here and checking something. So we go to street administration, which is actually another DPW section. Did we ever figure out why DPW is broken up? Because these are comptroller numbers, accounting numbers, right? Why did they break that out?
I don't know. I don't debate with the state.
I like debating with the state. It's one of my vices. All right, street administration personnel. So this is another payroll breakdown of the DPW employees. How that was allocated has changed slightly, which is the reason for the decrease. The administration side, that's Dusty basically, and then the personnel line, on the next line, you see the big increase. So that's for the 5 employees rather than 4 or 4.5, I think we might have budgeted for last year. Street maintenance stipend, this is for the foreman. Contractual, this is a general spend line, or is that salt?
No, that's.
General spend line.
Yeah. Do you want that? Is that gonna remain flat, or I increased it because of DPW contract? But I didn't know if that was.
Which one?
The stipend line. It's not a lot of money to me.
2,500 is fine.
Oh.
Contractual at 12, There's your CHIP spending line. 2 placeholders, street maintenance reimbursement and bridges. That bridges, by the way, goes back to the Lake Street Bridge. There was some spending need for that. Snow removal, of course.
Why is that? Is that again shifted?
That's our sidewalk guy.
Yeah.
Snow removal equipment. Remind me what was that?
It's an edger
Oh,
for the,
plow edger.
yes.
So yeah, it's a piece of equipment. We could probably take from a reserve line, but if it's only 1,000, it's probably easy enough.
Mhm.
Snow removal contractual, that's solid, right?
Yes.
Street lighting contractual, that's our street lights.
Mhm.
Sidewalk contractual, so that's a new one. That's one we have to decide. 10,000, I think, is mainly for Union Street, right?
Yeah, I think that's the focus. Ask Dusty, that's the number he came up with, and that's his best guess.
So the question then becomes, and maybe we can circle back to this one. Do we start to budget more? I guess it doesn't really make sense if we've identified a stretch for the year and it's going to cost about 10. Then we'll just know that if each year we can identify a stretch that costs 10, then we've done that part. And then the bigger pieces, the Main Street pieces, have to have grant money attached to it. It's just, they're just too big and too expensive.
The only other thought there. The idea being that there would be a part that kind of DPW would do, and then we're seeing smaller places around on Main Street. I know Ben and I walked around, some, for instance, up by the library, the corner there is kind of all over the place. Dusty's feeling was that the DPW is well equipped to kind of do long stretches, forms and whatnot, but kind of like fix a little bit here and fix a little bit there is not as easily in their wheelhouse, and we need to have someone else contract for that. The reason to bring it up is, do we want to have a little bit of play in there to say, maybe we do 2 things in a year? I don't know, got thoughts?
Gordon said it last time and I'll say it this time, I think Dusty needs to figure it out. Those little projects are things that's a core function of our DPW. Or in my mind, I think when you think of like, what does DPW do? Just in general, like fixing the sidewalk is one of those core functions. I don't disagree with maybe adding a little bit in as a cushion, and I do agree that there are some maintenance pieces that they likely won't be able to do. But I think fixing on,
Yeah.
like even for me, I can understand a way to fix uneven sidewalk.
Yeah.
You can just
Chip it
break it
up,
apart and
you
relay
regrade
the same way
and
you
then
would on a long
uh,
stretch. So the skill set is not different, it's just the willingness and the commitment to follow through and to do it. I mean, I don't want to project too much, but I think on some level we do need to pull his feet to the fire a little bit. Again, it doesn't negate at all the idea of sort of adding a cushion. There are some complex spots like the weird diamond plate outside of Gimme that still doesn't make any sense. There's pretty much so that might require expertise in the contract.
I think the only thought is maybe to your point, we should, it's rests on Dusty's point to get it done, and I can pressure on him to just do it in-house and then see how far that gets. But either which way, I think there'd be probably expense on top of that. So one thing is we could put a little bit of a cushion here as a placeholder. I'm happy to go talk to Dusty another round and try and nail that down a bit more.
Because you're saying that there is no sidewalk maintenance. This would all be
Right,
under
that-
sidewalk contractual.
Yes, there's, as far as I'm aware, a distinction between kind of net new, it's all maintenance to some degree or another. One is like rip up a large chunk, one is rip up a smaller chunk.
But so street maintenance is literally just the street, it does not relate to sidewalks
That's
at all.
That's
And so sidewalk contractuals, it was that would suggest money spent to either build or maintain existing road and sidewalk. And so 10,000 is what you got as a sort of an estimate to do Union Street as a whole new sidewalk.
That's my understanding from Dusty, yeah.
Is Union Street as long or longer than what you guys did last year? No,
No, that was huge. That's huge.
because that
No,
was about,
Not South.
Last year.
Sorry, South Street, but just the stretch from
Yeah.
the corner of Main to.
Well, from the church parking lot away.
is that
Probably
longer
about
than?
It might be about-
Maybe, yeah.
I feel like it's in the ballpark.
Yeah, because we
Similar.
go all the way to the street. I was sort of, I think
Because I believe it was only about $7,000.
this will be substantially harder though. I mean, there's grading that wasn't present there.
Okay.
Grading the slope, there's a curve.
Okay, I was just
It
saying.
would be
there's-
longer if you include going around the corner to McLeod.
I was just saying,
It'd be
there's,
longer.
it cost us $7, there's your 3,000 cushion, but okay, if it's gonna involve.
Let me, I just marked it in red. I want to come back to that one. Maybe we can put some additional money.
One other question about that.
Yeah.
Is the concern about that more about materials and not labor?
If that 7,000 is our benchmark, then it's all materials.
No, not for the new construction, for maintenance, like if we're thinking about that, like.
Oh, I don't think.
When we're discussing this right now, because I see that we've broken out their works into different areas of work. Is what we pay the labor. So I'm used to thinking of labor as like, you just pay labor, but you have a crew. What can you get done in a year? But I'm saying that we think of that differently and we say, nope, some of their time is here and here and here. So this $10,000 and then this sidewalk contractual would include labor as well as materials?
It's primarily materials.
Okay.
So if DPW does a repair during the hours of 7 to 3, that's already in the payroll lines.
That's what I'm wondering. Okay.
And that's
Okay.
where them budgeting their time
Yeah, okay.
becomes important. There's a cushion in here, so if that section of South Street was primarily volunteer and it cost 7,000, Union might be a little bit longer. So there's a little bit of cushion in there, probably not enough for a contractor.
I feel like you ought to figure maybe $2,000 for sidewalk maintenance for materials a year. To reduce that.
Yeah.
$1,000 anyway, just as you're ruminating on it.
Yeah,
I think it's probably more than that, because there's probably equipment we don't have, so there'd be equipment rentals and things like that. I think would
I see that red light is still on the owl. That makes me nervous. Has it been on the whole time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely muted, but somehow Keith is hearing us and he said it sounds fine, so.
It's just there.
Everything's good on this end.
Okay, great. Including the layover.
No layover,
Oh, excellent.
direct to Syracuse, and then a nice late night ride home.
The dream.
Looks like it could be snowy, which is not going to be fun.
Could be. Never know. Okay, off-street parking contractual is zeroed out. So this is paving of village parking lots. We don't have anything scheduled, I don't believe, for this year. We've got Heber Community Rec has requested an annual donation. An annual contractual payment. We don't make donations. $500. Youth Commission. This is the Ulysses Rec program. We should probably rename that.
No, it's for the youth
Still for
commission.
the Youth Commission?
Yeah.
Library contractual remains the same. Museum, that's the Historical Society, remains the same. Village Historian remains the same. Farmers Market is an offsetting expense of what's in the revenue side. We are now, so if we add up all these farmers market spend lines and take away the farmers market revenue lines, you may remember a couple of years ago, we had a big debate about village contribution being up to what, $10,000.
Right.
That's now come back down to around 5. So kudos to farmers market board and director. What was once $2,000 village spend, we bumped to 4 to try to get a manager that to try to attract a manager. We were then talking to raising it to 10 with the expectation that they needed to, well, they've done a good job of bringing that back down to where I think is a sustainable for as long as we want to have a farmer's market. I mean, $4,000 to $5,000 a year for the village to contribute to make sure the farmer's market is viable seems seems like an easy number to live with.
What is worth pointing out that 3,000 of that is from the town, or some chunk of that is from the town.
They are getting 3,000 from the town, but we're still
Right.
committed
No,
to
I-
5, yeah, the 3, town of Ulysses committed to 3.
Yeah, Debbie is doing a fantastic job as far as I can tell with the budgets. It's wonderful to have her there, and a solid market manager. It's really kind of turned around in the past couple of years. It's wonderful.
Made a big difference. Certainly as healthy as that market has ever been, both on Wednesday nights and financially. So the next line in blue, this is ETC. Jessica wants to add dollars.
Oh, pony.
Add dollars.
We're at pony rides with the village children. Okay, so, yeah, so we put that in there, right, because we were a new committee and we didn't know, and we didn't end up having to spend any, in large part because Winterfest, all got funded, and so and they didn't apply for any, funds. So what we do, there's 2 things that are pretty key that we should consider. There would be an additional this year. One I'd like to consider to be recurring, and I think that $2,000 annually for plants and soil to fill the planters of the village streets would be something that makes sense for from the tourism factor, because right now there isn't any village money allocated towards that, and that is what the Taking Care of Tiber estimates that it spends, and really. And I propose to the board that it's great that we have volunteer labor that is doing that and collecting funds on their own. They're not organized, but it really to be in keeping with what we want and what other villages and towns do. Other villages and towns, the DPW puts in planters and the flowers and all that. And I'm willing to say, absolutely, if that's confusing for too big a shift for DPW to think of doing that, then let's make it part of the tourism and the events of the downtown area in terms of seasonal decorations.
Well, there's also the beautification grant, right? So we could offset that.
We could offset it, just isn't gonna happen in 2022. It didn't happen in 2021. It won't happen in 2022, but absolutely, yeah.
And I did check, and they don't have an answer yet. But Jess, I don't know if you know this, the Taking Care of Tiber has about $1,700 left from the donations that we received last year.
Excellent.
So if it's about $2,000, we're talking about dirt.
And plants.
Why would we not take that from street maintenance contractual, which was budgeted for 13 and looks like it's going to come in around 10? And we are now budgeting for 12. What else is in that line?
I'm sorry, street maintenance contractual.
A 5110.4.
I gotta look,
Because that is a discretionary spend line. So if Dusty is not spending that line as much as if those discretionary spends are being met to the tune of roughly 10,000 a year, and we're budgeting for 12,
That's great.
I would think we can max out that line rather than duplicate it potentially. You know, particularly the things that should be DPW in the first place.
The one concern there is that, right, the planter soil, it's particular, just like the materials for any project, particular to any project.
it's mostly Seneca stone.
Stone, dirt,
Yeah, okay.
specific
Yeah.
ground materials.
Yeah.
Whatever quality.
So
or
you're
type it
saying
might be.
leave that there or move it over?
I think that what's in street maintenance contractual should be able to absorb $2,000 worth of special dirt.
Okay, so then that gets communicated as the funds are being spent by that department and that commission. Like, oh, right, we need to remember we're gonna put in soil and plants this year.
Well, when Vicky gets a bill for gravel,
Mhm.
dirt,
Okay.
or plants, that should be a DPW spend.
Yeah, okay.
More so than a tourism spend. See, when I think of,
Yeah,
if you think about if we had to train someone brand new tomorrow, don't make me train
don't
someone.
leave
brand new.
tomorrow.
But if we had to train someone brand new tomorrow, we would say, well, this is either ambulance, fire, police, front office, or DPW. And so, or water and sewer, and so, again, gravel, dirt, plants
Yeah,
kind of fits in the DPW.
Great, as long as it, again, if it got overlooked because there was something else that came up, that would be disappointing,
Yeah.
unless it was an emergency.
You know, I think banners, event-related supplies,
Okay.
and if we have to pay someone to do any of that,
Yeah.
that feels like ETC.
Okay, great, so good, I can, report back to taking care of Trumansburg and our general health of living here and events and tourism that we've got certain plans coming.
Yeah, so I think the plan is to align them and.
Yeah, and that'll come out of it.
And that'll come out
Yeah,
that line and
Great,
they'll send it to Vicky review or.
well, now it's interesting, and now I feel like it goes
They
right
can
back to
send it
DPW, and that I need to be part of it. Yeah.
No, the reimbursements still go to the treasurer
No, I
regardless.
mean, they generally like to link it. The commissioner or somebody else to see what's going on. We'll just take that offline. Okay,
Well,
so,
it's no different than if ETC or taking care of T-Bird needed help from the police department
yeah,
to have someone man a barricade
Yeah.
for an event, they would reach out to the police chief,
Yeah.
who would then check with Keith. So it's the same kind of thought process. Not to overcomplicate it, but I think at least from a spending line,
that's great.
it should be deep.
We'll figure it out.
There should be
that.
deep.
I mean, we'll just keep being a little.
But do you want to use what they collected, the donations?
I think that they have some plans, there's some planters that need to be replaced and all of
Okay.
that,
Okay.
so yeah.
Okay, so,
We should not count that towards this request.
and I'll have a talk with Ben's mom next Thursday after your meeting
Okay,
about what we're gonna do, where, and then you and I will talk about the whole DPW. We'll get it, got it.
okay. And so then there's two other major things, and one is banners, and the other is sort of they're related. It's general street decorations, again, beyond plants and soil. So banners, that might be seasonal. So in the summer, farm market banners are up. Is that enough? Do we also want additional summer banners? Do we want a winter banner to be part of the Winterfest reality so that our streets are beautiful? What do we want to do? And then the street, the actual snowflakes, which are pretty spendy.
We also need to pay for the stage that's gonna go on Union Street.
So that's a third thing. Right now, I'm talking about sort of annual things. And they, once this year, we did a 150th celebration. So don't worry, we have a plan. But I'm trying to get to the things that we're thinking of. We haven't necessarily had the annuals.
So how many spots, remind me again, I always forget, how many spots do we have for snowflake lights?
I think that we have ample spots, but 6 would be great to highlight just a downtown corridor.
It doesn't seem like nearly enough.
Well, here's what, do you wanna, it's all about kind of what you wanna spend.
How much?
We spent, let me just finish this if I could. If we did banners and lit poles with intermittent snowflakes, you could still have a very lovely presence that actually affords you a little bit more of something you may want to highlight in an annual year or not with banners. And it isn't an overwhelming now someone on the big strip, and it makes the snowflake a bit more of a moment instead of a blur.
Do you recall how many of the poles have electricity?
Yeah, 6. Oh, no, the lighting poles,
How many telephone poles and street lights on Main Street have available electricity to plug something in? There's a number and I don't remember what it is.
so I don't know, and just to be clear, are you talking about the streetlight poles as well and not telephone poles?
Mhm.
There's 6 on the Garrett side, and I didn't actually consider the other side at the moment, so.
Those are the telephone.
Those are the telephone poles, because we can't hang the snowflakes, was my understanding.
Yeah,
from
but if you're
the
talking about
streetlights.
wrapping poles
Yeah.
with light, we need to know if there's electricity there.
Yeah,
And I want to say it's a couple dozen.
That's what I was gonna say, 13.
they're not, they're only
More than
7,
that.
okay.
Okay,
Can we buy smaller snowflakes and,
no, because they have to match the ones with the emblems for the people that paid for them
Oh, okay.
for their dearly departed.
And I apologize, I don't have a more hard number for you.
and there's like $700 or $800.
Yeah.
something like that, something.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we have 2 that are good, 4 times 7 is 28.
And again, there's a way you can stage things, right? If you buy those this year and you sort of have that notion of the thing, then you can increase the decoration, like, and you buy, maybe, maybe we don't like the way that just lighting the light poles goes, and so then you buy one, you can build it out in stages, you don't have to do the whole thing.
So the last 2 years, high school graduating class banners, there were about 70-ish of them. And that was one on either side.
That's huge, yeah.
It was 70-ish of them, and it was about $2,000. So if you're only doing one banner per post instead of two, you're about half that.
Yeah.
That first year was more expensive because we paid for the brackets and the pictures. So we're up to 3,800.
And now, to be clear, you're just talking about winter at the moment. That would be a seasonal banner, and then it's fine if farmers market banners are what's the summer season.
Right. Do you remember, did they have dollar money in the budget for banners with the market? I can't remember.
They have sufficient banners, I believe, whatever it is, she was, I
Okay.
spoke with Debbie, and she's
They
either,
just ordered them 2 years ago.
yeah,
No,
they're,
I know, I feel like we went around on sizing, and I feel like they were a different size. And that was a problem because adjusting the brackets up and down every time becomes a large cost on DPW.
and so we're clear that whatever banners they have would be a normal size, and whatever banners we might purchase with the village would mean that you don't need to move the brackets.
Right, we want a standard size.
We have
It
those
is-
dimensions written in Dusty's and keeping with that, so.
Dusty has no idea what the banners are. They were all ordered through the school.
No, I'm sorry,
I have
I'm
that
speaking
information.
specifically about the brackets. He knows that no one's gonna ask bracket sizes to be changed based on a banner that might be for the farmer's market or a
Well,
banner for the
but to
village.
be clear, the farmer's market banner, of which I don't think there are more than a handful that are up every summer, are tiny. And they don't go on the brackets, on the black light poles, black street light poles that we use for the graduating seniors. The graduating senior banners we've done 2 years in a row on the brackets, on the decorative light
Yeah, yeah.
fixtures are easily twice the size
So we're,
of
so what she
the
said she did put them on the brackets, so then where are the farmer's
tiny
market
little brackets
banners?
on telephone poles in front of
Yeah.
Atlas.
And up Main Street, like all the way up Main Street.
I don't think there's
When
hardly
Hugh made their banners, they're not the same size as that.
tiny.
I think the Q ones are a couple of years back.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they're hanging, because we had them hanging past the village office with the farmers market.
Yeah, the Q ones were, they were big.
they're big, they're bigger than the current ones that they're using. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the
Smaller,
farmers,
smaller ones down by Atlas on the telephone poles.
there might have been, I remember the ones that are now are bigger than the ones than Q made. But
Regardless, I
yeah,
think it would be
yeah,
nice to
definitely.
standardize those banners
Definitely.
I'm looking to see how many they ordered.
on the brackets that were recently purchased for graduating seniors.
I agree. I do know that they were not planning on buying new banners, so we'll just have to go back and revisit if the size that the village wants to have is the same size as the farmer's market currently has.
So
And if they're too small,
they have 10 banners
Yep.
that are 18 by 36 inches. That's 1.5 by 3. But I think, and now I can't remember if that's the right size for those brackets or not.
again, the brackets, I feel like we're getting a little bit lost in this notion of the bracket, like we can standardize it, so it's not another 4 hours of guys changing brackets, like that can be,
I don't love the idea of farmers market banners all up and down Main Street all summer.
that's the question.
I don't hate it, but I also don't love it. I think this year would be the year to order 150th anniversary
Yeah, I
banners.
know, which brings us into the one-off thing, because that would be a unique cost that we wouldn't have up next year.
Right.
We would then, I think that I'm in agreement, let's pretend that money didn't matter for the moment. I think having some sort of summer seasonal thing that sort of celebrates freshness in life in an agricultural community that is not specifically the farmer's market makes a lot of sense for the attractiveness of the downtown. That would be separate than the farmer's market. Farmer's market banners could be interspersed or could just be near the farmer's market or something like that, right? But this year, it is the 150th. So I would say this year that the 150th banner would never be used again. And so next year we would be saying, let's make summer banners. So summer banners and winter banners is kind of, I think, a vision for a street decoration that feels.
So if we say, so we're just thinking about budget numbers, if we say 2,800 for snowflake lights.
Yeah.
Which would be a one-time purchase. Hopefully we don't have to replace them for every 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And $1,000 for 150th banners,
Yeah,
which we will leave up throughout winter
okay,
until the end of the year.
okay, great.
Then next year, we won't have the $2,800 spent on snowflakes. So we'll be able to add in
The summer banners.
two seasonal banners, a summer and a winter.
Yep, great, okay, yep, like it.
So that's 3,800 total. Now the question becomes your 15, the
That's
1,500,
3,800 total.
the 1,500 that's in the spreadsheet. Is that for something else or was that just a
Yeah,
placeholder?
that was a $1,000 cushion in case, in COVID Winterfest couldn't find any traction, but we still had to give some funds to make sure we had a commitment to making Winterfest happen last year. And then also 500 for anyone else to ask for a specific event like the crit.
Now, do you?
And wait a second, sorry, we were thinking about, there might be some money spent on signage that we didn't spend last year. And we ended up getting like donations for the, to get a giant park.
Do you think we, the village, will need to spend money on an individual to help coordinate anything 150th related?
What about design of any of those banners?
I think that we can solicit some help, though. Let's be honest about that. I mean, the help that I would like to get, to say, here's $500 would be somehow silly. And I feel like we could get that help easily.
If this $1,500 isn't gonna be used, couldn't you buy two of your snowflakes, like before May 31st?
Half of the other.
Oh,
Well, but that is what you're getting at, Gordon, isn't it? Whether the 3,800 needs to be added to 1,500 or. whether-
Well, I was
okay.
actually,
We did 1,500.
I was actually thinking about making that line 5,000. Just make it.
I think it
round.
does, but now we should talk about the 150th celebration, because that is a unique one-off for this year. I think 5,000 makes sense, and if we don't spend it, we don't spend it. But we can then do the things for the beautification that just identified for 3,800. You can contribute to some community events. Or improvement of the parks reality or the green space reality if that comes along, and then signage. So the 150th, we had talked about having piggybacking events that already exist, but it was brought up, and I think there was some traction from this board, definitely there was from the chamber, of having a critical mass event. And so the notion was, I met with Nana as the ETC. If Porch Fest happened it happens on a Saturday, it's 12 to 5, and then we have a dance in the street on Union Street. We get a band that's a nice draw with a sound system, and then you have the stage could be donated, the actual stage, but you have the band that's $2,000 to have a band. Really, and then 800 to 1,000 for a sound system. And then if you want to do any amount of printing materials, if we want to print about the 150th and have any posters or handbills to hand out about a series of events, like 300, we want a radio spot, 500. If we want social media, 500. If we want photography, $1,000. And the notion would be Friday night, let's say, this is all theoretical. Let's say the conservatory wants to host a living history lecture and some artifacts, and they want to do something Friday night to capitalize on it. They put on their own thing. Great. Then Saturday, Porch Fest is already happening. You don't have to do anything that, but we have this critical mass event for dancing, and then it ends at 6:30. We can also have a moment for like, thank you so much. What a great community, like we did at Winterfest, which makes everybody feel good. That's a benefit of it. And then people go off and do whatever they want, and then Sunday we do something that doesn't cost us any money, but is part of this whole weekend. For example, croquet by the water tower and chicken barbecue and something, and maybe, oh, by the way, let's also reach out and see if the library wants to do something, or TCNS wants to do something, like how you get the community involved. But we would be on the hook for funding one way or the other, sort of that critical Saturday night.
Who are you paying $500 to do social media?
Yeah, I don't know, I just checked in on, I was like, if we had to pay someone, I mean, maybe someone on the, maybe.
That's
Keith
absurd.
Hannon- Maybe Keith Hannon will do it for free. Do you know what I mean? It was not an idea.
I can think of a
like-
half a dozen people who are on
You gotta
social
find-
media all day long.
So they probably would, but it's also like, that was also too more than saying, do you wanna maximize all the events of the season, the whole season, from spring to, is there gonna be Cyberfest? Like, it was just so yeah, we could take that number out. We don't have to necessarily do $1,000 for photography, but if you wanna pay someone, that's a going rate. Sound and band are not really negotiable in my opinion. However, and I don't know about this, or can we get, if it's a village event, can somebody sponsor the stage? Could a local business say, we want to sponsor the stage for them?
If the chamber was willing to be involved, then yes.
Okay, so the chamber,
So,
tell me how that one was the wording.
well, because unless the chamber is still not wanting to hold people's money, they're not for profit.
Okay,
So if the chamber's doing a good job getting things back on track, but if there's a reluctance from the chamber to participate in this,
no, just tell me what that would look like, I just don't know. You're saying, would that be a chamber event? Or
the
be
chamber would
stage?
fundraise money. The chamber would simply, chamber could be a sponsor of the stage. The chamber could do fundraising.
Okay,
On behalf of the chamber, we're asking local businesses and anyone else who wants to contribute to our presence at the village's 150th anniversary celebration.
okay,
There's any of a number of ways that a not-for-profit could be involved.
okay. So I feel like it's
You know.
possible to raise $3,000 to be the stage.
It might be a nice comeback for the chamber to be, the entertainment band so-and-so sponsored by the Truesburg Area Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah,
The village, we're talking about taxpayer
Yeah.
dollars. Makes sense for banners, streetlights, decorations, things that beautify the
Okay.
community. Somebody's gonna complain about the choice of music. Why did my tax dollars go to that band? That kind of
okay.
parsing a little bit.
Well, certainly then.
Where tax dollars
Promotion of the event though,
Promotion of the event would be fine.
or the series of events, again, like if they're gonna.
Printing costs make sense. We're not paying someone $500 for social media. That's wacky.
Okay.
I think you might have the wrong standards for social media use.
I mean, it's like if you pay someone to do a campaign for a series of months because you have a series of events, like that is not a high figure, but if we don't want to do that, we don't have to do
There's
that.
4,000 eyeballs every time I post something on the mayor. I mean, what are we trying to
Do you
promote?
want to? I don't know.
I'm not saying
it's
I just
that
don't
though.
wanna-
It's like looking around and saying, okay, we can try to find a volunteer who's gonna be doing it, but it's not me, and it's not Mona. It's probably not the mayor. It's probably not one of the other. trustees.
It's probably the Park School grad who spent 10 years on TV and can't stay off social media himself now.
Who needs another committee?
Yes.
Is he gone?
He's gone. So
He needs a committee.
I'm picking on him on YouTube.
There's something appropriate.
Give it to the Parky who, did TV. That makes perfect sense. Plus, he has the Bright Crowd book where we can promote that.
Yeah, if he would do it, that would be great, but it's just it's gonna
Yeah.
happen.
Okay. Well, that's why we're starting in March and not,
And we can leverage the Tompkins Chamber also
right.
to help.
So at the end of the day,
We're changing it to
budget
5.
number,
So I like the 5,000 for that line.
5,000 for that line,
ETC.
38 is already spent, so that's actually less discretionary funds than we had last year,
Which we didn't use.
because nothing happened.
Winterfest went off great.
We didn't spend any, all right.
Exactly. And
Okay.
so if,
Signs won't get done, then that's okay.
which signs?
The
Entrance
gateway
signs? Yeah, we're gonna hold off on those. I think we need,
Right.
wait. Signage was on another line.
It was.
Oh, well.
Okay,
I'm
5,000.
okay, and I'm also okay if we have an overage in that line of a couple $1,000, you're not breaking the bank.
I don't think 5,000 is enough.
1.4.
No, I'm saying if we have an overage, if you spend
Oh,
7,500,
I see, okay, oh, okay, all right,
if you
okay.
end up going over 5,000 by 1,500, 2,000,
Okay.
3,000. It's not gonna hurt anything.
Okay, I'm
In the,
comfortable
in the
with
grand
that.
scheme. But by putting the 5,000 in this year, we can have an expectation of maintaining it
Yeah, I like that.
for seasonal banners,
And then
replacement of
we do
snowflake
any
lights every
signs or
few
develop a
years.
green space. Okay, thank you, that's good.
That sound good? Benjamin?
I mean, Jess, if there's anything you can spend that 1,500 on for this year
Don't say that.
before.
Don't say that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I don't think there's any applications in front of us at this time.
Okay, so ETC. Getting some money in that ETC line, 5,000. Food net stays the same. Zoning is a payroll line with an increase attached. Zoning contractual, what did we figure out here? Oh, that's EDR. So zoning contractual, I think should be 7,500. There was a conversation to be had because Tom is concerned that there might be zoning related work that might fall to an engineer with respect to either the mobile home park or 46 South. I don't think I want to budget for that because depending on what the work is, there may be a developer's agreement reimbursement in there anyway. So unless anyone thinks I'm all wet, I will make that 7,500.
But doesn't that just cover the EDR?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay.
It actually more than covers EDR because we're going to start paying them in this budget year.
Oh, okay, okay.
You say it's 7,500 total.
I should have had that, those papers for you to sign at some point too.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that email today. Zoning publishing, zoning legal, definitely want to make sure there's money for Guy because you just never know. Planning personnel, we don't have a planner. Planning contractual. What is planning contractual again?
Anything that has to do with the planning board, like MRB's invoices.
Which we've always kept at 0,
Except-
Yes,
except we've actually spent some.
but you had, yeah. And
Is that?
I guess Tom was in anticipation of 46 South Street.
Zoning contractual.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Well, something's been in there historically.
Yes. And then we had that appropriated spending line when the big stuff for 46 South Street was going on, or when it first started.
Appropriated spending is for the planning board to spend. I don't think there's anything the planning board needs to spend money on this year. They can always request it if they need it. Contractual. Planning board contractual. I don't think there's anything coming their way. So 2 budget years ago, that line was 2,000.
Mhm.
Don't think it needs to be more than that. If anything at all. I mean, we zeroed it out last year.
This year, the big thing was the subdivision, which was Compass, that's zone from MRB.
There's nothing with that office property?
It's been done. The subdivision is the only thing they have to look at.
Oh.
Nothing that they're doing that would require any planning board except for the approval of that piece. Now they can do roads, water and sewer. That was ZBA, needed to check in on that. I'm gonna say make that 2.
Oh,
I don't think we'll spend it either. At
okay,
least there's something in there.
okay.
No, I don't recall why we zeroed that out last year.
That does feel nice,
It feels weird.
especially in emergency.
But anyway, I think 2, we'd use 2 for a number of years. I think that's fair.
Okay.
Planning legal, we're keeping the same. Spreadsheet here. Yeah, planning legal, we're keeping the same, a little over this year, but I think there's gonna be a lot more zoning work than planning in this coming year for Guy. Storm drainage contractual, this is our ongoing fight with stormwater, so we bumped that up from 30 to 35. Garbage contract remains the same. Community beautification grant, we don't know if we're getting anything. Shade trees, did we spend our money on our shade trees this year?
$4,800. Oh, yeah. No, that comes in the spring, right?
I don't know what shade trees
Yeah,
is.
$5,000 a
It's
year.
your program where
trees.
people can submit for reimbursement,
I think it's shade trees.
because that's what New York State.
So sketchy.
The trees they provide shade.
What word we're moving?
We had a replanting budget though.
We had a theoretical one, but we
Not
decided
so, not so theoretical.
as a group not to do that.
Well, it snuck in then.
No, this is for the reimbursement to people
Very
when
good.
they cut their trees down.
So just so everyone's aware,
So unsure.
Killing.
very poorly.
Yes.
Well, I can't, that's New York State.
No, so this is actually, this was delayed and sort of deferred because I had to leave. So I'm hoping that we can catch this in the spring before the end of the budget year, but it's gonna be tight. In any case, for next year, we will hopefully have a catch up, so it will be the same or more. So
So on my personal spreadsheet, I'm gonna rename that because I don't care what the comptroller called it. I'm gonna rename that the not so shade.
yeah,
It's official.
Well, I can rename it
so
here,
that
just
money
can't
is
rename it there.
specifically risk mitigation. Like that is very specifically. I had hoped to add planting and sort of more general, like maintenance of village-owned trees and green spaces and stuff, but
Okay.
this, as it is purely risk.
Okay. So the not so shade tree line, we've got landfill brush maintenance, and then we've got a bunch of state retirement. These are payroll based, like the Medicare is payroll based. There's some disability insurance lines. Health insurance is under hospital and medical. Broken out between different departments. We have a separate line for EMS, hospital, medical. Would you see a reduction in there based on who is working and who is on our insurance and who is not? A 9730.6, so that's what we borrowed for sidewalks. Plus interest on the next line. We have one more year of one more lease on a fire truck, and then it drops off next year.
It's right in the drop down.
And then we're down to reserve lines. So we have DPW equipment reserve, building reserve, fire apparatuses from the fire contracts, firehouse, police, and so on. Just looking to see, we do have a slight increase in the fire apparatus reserve we determined last fall. There was a big bump here somewhere. Oh, the fire equipment reserve. That's for, again, we agreed on that last fall, but that's for anticipated, I think, radios, right? Be significant spend over the next few years. So, any questions on any of the expenditure lines? Okay. I'm just going to do something on my spreadsheet here and do some quick calculation.
So I think, Vicky, I'm gonna get you to build this into the spreadsheet for you, but that just auto generates the tax rate and like that. Be useful, I think.
So,
I'll show you that later.
Yes. That's Wednesday.
any thoughts on the conversation about tax rate? Should we keep it flat, which we can for sure? Should we be looking to bump it up a little bit?
I'll throw out my take,
Mhm.
not super well reasoned, but I'd like to see it stay flat. Mostly under the reasoning that it seems like we can this year. And the anticipation of increased assessment next year makes it So I don't feel like we need to start ramping anything because I think an assessment's gonna kind of ramp a lot for us, even if we remain flat. And so I'd be more interested in remaining flat, seeing what that looks like. And potentially even remaining flat again. I like the idea of kind of planning forward. I do feel like there's a lot coming down the pipe. The more we dig into DPW, water, stormwater, sewer, it seems like there's a lot. But I think we're in an enviable position where we may be able to keep it flat, even though assessment means that people will pay more, but we're not adding, pain on top of pain. So I don't know, that's kind of my off the cuff thought.
Okay. Jess or Ben?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the same.
I mean, to stay even, we're at like 41,000 when we're coming down, so
42.
yeah. That's that they were talking about from the fund balance right now. Being high. It almost feels irresponsible. So unless there's something materially that we want to change within the budget. I think if we stay anywhere close to what we have here, and I think it all looks really good to me. And we put in less than 40,000.
Right, and we have another ARPA payment that's coming in this summer. We have not put that in the budget because it's, government can always change their mind on that. But if that does come, that's another 81. So we are in a strong budget position.
We do, like, there was once upon a time a tax stabilization reserve that we could consider adding something like that if we wanted to kind of bump it up, but I agree with that. I think if we're sort of moving up probably in terms of the overall levy next year, so there's no need to ramp and I think it's really good.
Okay.
I should just quickly add one caveat, which is that Joel and I will, over the next couple of weeks, be looking closely at the EMS budget since he hasn't really done it yet. And part of that is inspired by the fact that some of our EMTs are making less than $15 an hour. So there will be some adjustment there, in addition to the stipends not being there, which now that I'm thinking about it, wasn't there. So maybe we're at like 50. So there will be some tweaks, but not huge.
Okay. So Vicky will be appropriating 42,000 of fund balance. That'll make our levy. Should make sure this balances. Hey, balances, measure it. That'll make the levy 1055817, which is a 0.7% increase. Which I guess technically means we don't need to adopt the tax cap override. But we should do it.
So
100% agree.
what's the per thousand?
That'll make the rate 7.2515. So that'll be our fourth consecutive year of 7.25.
I think actually instead of our, anniversary celebrations this year will be the fourth.
Keep us right in the median. Be curious what other villages are doing this spring. Maybe they're applying ARPA funds. Okay, great. So next week on the 9th, we will do water and sewer. That should be relatively straightforward. Any other general fund budget questions?
I had a couple, but I think it's all right. I'll just email them. Sort of start it. I highlighted it. Lines.
Just FYI, when you talk to Joel about the budget, you guys did there's that like contingency line, I'll call it, of the 9 grand, so we do have stuff
Yeah.
to
No,
not
I
have to
know.
add those stipends.
And it's really more
in.
about just catching him up, like, the intent is not to change things.
Okay, no, I just wanted to let you know if you remember.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, anything else general budget related?
Reiterate, thanks to you for doing this. Your office is far and away better.
And if there's nothing else general budget related, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel issue and matters pursuant to collective bargaining under the Taylor law.
Reluctant to make that motion.
Second.
All in favor? And we'll do the